the decision was made to just throw it out. Throw the baby out with the bathwater and start over. And that's what they did. And so several key people of the representatives were the writers of the Constitution. As I've already said, 4 pages, 400 words, not very long. Obviously, the representatives had to approve it, and then it had to go to the states to get the state's approval. Well, 4 of the 13 states didn't even come to the Constitutional Convention, so basically it was 9. Those 9 did approve it. There was a lot of issues and arguments over slavery at that time, and they just put it off for 100 years. And so finally enough states did approve the Constitution, and now the Constitution creates a different kind of government than what was created by the Articles of Confederation. It now provides that the states give over all their authority, not just part of it, but all of their authority over 3 things in the national life of the people of our country: interstate commerce, foreign trade, and developing a central military force that protects our country. The states, when they, by approving the new Constitution, they agree to giving up over their power, and they have no right to veto any decision of the national government. And also, the Constitution provides a way for the new national government to get money by taxing the people of the nation, but it has to be equal. They can't tax one group higher than the other. Well, they can, but within that group it has to be equal. They can't just pick on one person to do that. Okay. And I've already, moving on. What are the 3 areas of life of the nation given by the states to the new federal government by the Constitution? You know, I've answered it 3 or 4 times. What are they?
Interstate trade.
Interstate commerce.
Foreign trade and protection.
Foreign trade and a development of a central military. Now, do you know the difference between interstate commerce, it's spelled I-N-T-E-R, and intra, I-N-T-R-A, commerce? Interstate business is where the people or other businesses are doing business with people in other states. Intrastate. Intrastate. Intrastate is just doing business within a state. Now, only the state have the power to regulate intra-state business. And they do a lot of different ways. The federal government regulates intra-state business. Thus, the interstate commerce being one of the very first agencies being created. When writing the Constitution, who were the writers trying to protect? And from whom? Who were they trying to protect?
The people.
The people of the country, and who were they trying to protect from?
The government.
The new federal government. How did the framers of the Constitution provide this needed protection?
The bill.
They did it by the way they organized the government.
Checks and balances.
The way they organized the government. Yes?
So intra is within the state and then inter is with others?
Correct. So how did they organize the government? They put it into branches. And what are the 3 branches? Executive, legislative, judicial. So they created the power of the government and they put it into 3 branches. Remember, there's only 3 things that the federal government has any authority over at all, and that's true even today: interstate commerce, foreign trade, and a central military. Nothing else. Not in the Constitution. If it's not in the Constitution, they can't do it. So they created the way the government, the way the writers of the Constitution In order to protect the people of the nation from the federal government, they set up the organization of the federal government in three branches. And of course, that's set up to accomplish, hopefully, at least what? Between the branches? Conflict. Conflict.
Yeah.
And it's the conflict that protects us from the federal government. If it was just one branch of the federal government, the president, the executive branch, the king, then he would be deciding everything and we couldn't do anything. We can rely upon the Constitution creating a conflict between the branches of the government so they don't, any one of them, take over control and do too much to the people of the country. Under the Constitution, how is this relationship between the states and the federal government described? A partnership, exactly. Number 8, what's missing in the Constitution? Number 1, there's nothing mentioned about how disputes between the three branches are going to be settled. There's nothing mentioned about how the dispute that between the three branches are going to be settled. And there's nothing mentioned about any personal rights that the people have from the federal government. There's nothing mentioned about the right to free speech. There's nothing mentioned about the right to freedom of religion. There's nothing mentioned about the right to freedom of press. And all of those were important subject matters to the legislatures of the various states, but there's nothing there. So there wasn't much they could argue about. And that's exactly why they were left out. Because if they were put in there, there was bound to be a lot of disagreement among the legislatures of the various states. So the two things that were missing, what's the first one? There's nothing mentioned about how to resolve disputes among the branches of the federal government. There was nothing mentioned in the Constitution but what came along to give us the answer.
Bill of Rights.
No.
The amendments.
No.
Personal rights.
United States versus.
Mulberry versus Madison in 1803. That decided it. And what decided the issue of no personal rights in the Constitution? The Bill of Rights in 1791. The fact of the matter is that's the only way that those people who went to try to convince the legislatures in each of the states to accept the Constitution, because they kept asking the question, well, where are the provisions dealing with the rights of our citizens of the country? You know, and they had a whole list of those rights that they wanted, and it's not in there. And so they accepted the Constitution because there wasn't nothing in there, but there was a promise that we'll get it done. We will make amendments and we will add those rights into the Constitution by amendment form. And they did that, 1791. Okay. The first 10 amendments approved in 1791 only prohibit conduct by the federal government towards the citizens of the country. When was the prohibition imposed upon state government and by what amendment? It's 14th Amendment, 1868. 1868. Number 10, where does the federal government get its power to act? Where do you think the federal government
The
gets its
Constitution.
authority and its power to act on
The Cons-
anything?
Constitution.
Only from the Constitution. Only from the Constitution. And does that question, do you have any questions about that part of it?
I'm still, what is the correct answer to that one actually?
Which one?
To the one that between the Confederate and federal.
What number?
between Confederate and Federal. What
What's
was,
the difference between the two forms of the national government?
yeah, the Confederate or Federal?
No, it's not, yeah, confederal, not confederal, confederal,
Confederate and Federal,
yes, and federal. What's
Yes.
the difference?
but still,
In the confederal form, the states have the final authority
Oh.
on any decision. Whereas in the federal form of government, the states give over all of their authority to the federal government to make final decisions in those three areas of American life.
thank you, sir.
Okay, let me move on here. A new subject, I'm gonna go through chapter 6 a little bit more than what I did last week. We're just gonna have to take some notes